Every evening he waited a little longer at the dinner table, not because he was hungry, because somewhere in the back of his mind, the part that had not yet accepted the arithmetic of how long his parents had been gone, he had constructed a specific scenario: the door opening, his mother and father stepping through, his father holding up the gauntlet with the usual theatrical flourish and making the joke he had been rehearsing for years, that they could travel anywhere in the world and still make it home for dinner. He never told anyone about the scenario. He kept eating. He kept waiting. His name is Ezreal. And the story of how a boy who was already exceptional at everything became the most celebrated explorer-adventurer in Piltover is also the story of a dinner table he has never entirely left. New here? Subscribe. Every week, a League of Legends story told the way it deserves to be heard. The household he grew up in was not ordinary by any standard, and Ezreal understood this early, enough that it shaped how he understood ordinariness itself. His parents were merchants, not the mundane kind who move goods between adjacent cities and come home each evening with predictable stories. They were the kind of merchants who had made rarity itself their specialty, the most unusual artifacts, the most obscure magical objects, the kind of inventory that required traveling to places that most people with any commercial sense would decline to visit, negotiating with parties that most people with any survival instinct would decline to engage, and then bringing back things that had not been available in Piltover before because no one else had been sufficiently motivated and sufficiently reckless to acquire them. When they were home, which was inconsistently, the household filled with stories, tales of harrowing passages through territories that no official map had yet correctly described, close calls that were delivered in the tone of amusing anecdotes rather than genuine alarms. Ezreal absorbed all of it with the specific hunger of a child who had not yet learned that the world being large and dangerous was a reason for caution rather than ambition. He was left in the care of his uncle, Professor Lymere, who found the arrangement considerably more challenging than he had anticipated. The boy was not difficult in any simple sense. He was exceptional, genuinely, disruptively exceptional in a way that made conventional educational structures awkward. He absorbed information the way certain materials absorb light, completely, and without apparent effort. Hex-tech mechanics, ancient history, arcane theory, archaeological methodology. He could pass any examination without visible preparation, which was either a gift or a form of contempt for the examination process, depending on which way you looked at it. Professor Lymere hired the strictest tutors available. They were very good at what they did. What Che Bijot they could not account for. P.D. Rothereska was a student who was already operating several steps past the curriculum before the lesson began. When the tutors were not watching, Ezreal explored. Here is the thing about Piltover that most of its residents choose not to think about too carefully. It is built on layers. The gleaming towers and hex-tech workshops that define the city's self-image occupy the upper registers. Below them are older structures, basements, vaults, the accumulated infrastructure of a city that has been building and rebuilding on the same ground for generations. And below those are the undercity passages, the forgotten tunnels, the spaces, metatala, that the official architecture has stopped trying to account for. Ezreal knew them all. This was not an accident or a casual exploration. He had mapped them systematically, not with the instruments of a professional surveyor, but with the specific internal compass of someone who had discovered early that he possessed a directional sense so precise it operated below the speciti stonag ver specica muscumel threshold of conscious attention. He simply knew where he was. He had always known where he was. Walls did not disorient him. Darkness did not disorient him. The labyrinthine Varani tunnels beneath the university that had swallowed more than one graduate student were, to Ezreal, a pleasantly complex route between 2 points. He moved through locked rooms with the ease of someone for whom locks were a puzzle to be solved rather than a boundary to be respected. He found things, strange things, beautiful things, objects that had no obvious commercial value, but that clearly had history embedded in them, the specific weight of something that had been important to someone, somewhere, at a time that the present world had mostly stopped paying attention to. He was building something, though he could not have articulated it at the time, a relationship with the past as a place that still existed and could be visited if you were willing to go to the kind of trouble most people were not. His parents came home less often as the years passed. He noticed dat de hele haast he did not say anything about go low he playspeel with the bleary low, noticing. He kept eating dinner at the table and keeping half his attention on the door. Then one day, Professor Lymere sat him down and told him that his parents had gone deep into the ruins of Shurima and had not been heard from since. The professor said they had most likely perished. Ezreal said nothing. What was happening in his chest in that moment was not something the professor was equipped to receive, and Ezreal had never been the kind of person who offered what the room was not ready for. He kept the specific, unreasonable certainty that his parents were alive to himself. He kept the dinner table scenario. He kept the image of his father holding up the gauntlet, making goes. Achti Yuda, the joke. He just also, now, had a direction. This is the part of Ezreal's story that the adventure accounts tend to skip past too quickly, the grief. They focus on the gauntlet, the ruins, the impossible escapes. What they underestimate is, whole it is driving all of it. He was not exploring for the thrill of exploration, he was following a trail that he believed, against all evidence and probability, still led somewhere his parents were waiting. His father's research had been focused on a single target for years. The tomb of Nizen, an ancient Shurimian sorcerer, whose burial site was rumored to contain an artifact of extraordinary power, a gauntlet that could teleport its wearer from one location to another as if distance itself were a problem to be solved rather than a condition to be endured. His father had made a standing joke about it. If he found the gauntlet, he could travel anywhere in the world and still make it home for dinner. Ezreal assembled what he had. His father's research notes, partial translations of Shurimian funerary records, the last known, make it home for his location his parents had been heading toward. A pair of protective goggles that had been in the family's workshop for as long as he could remember. He left a note for his uncle, brief, not apologetic, the kind of note that communicates a decision already made, and found a trading vessel heading for Nashrima, a coastal city in Shurima. He was discovered as a stowaway before they had covered half the distance. The captain, unimpressed with the explanation and prepared to throw him overboard, found himself interrupted by Ezreal producing a sky chart and pointing out something that the ship's navigator, now considerably paler, confirmed. They were on a direct course for a reef formation that would destroy the hull within the hour. Ezreal took the navigator's position for the 12th remainder of the voyage. He arrived in Shurima and began to work. The months that followed were the education that no tutor could have provided. He moved through ruins that had not been entered in centuries. He read the landscape the way he had learned to read everything, not line by line but in totality, pattern recognition operating faster than conscious analysis. Ancient Shurimian funerary architecture had its own logic, and he absorbed that logic the way he had absorbed hex-tech mechanics and archaeological history, completely, without apparent effort, and then immediately exceeded what absorption alone could produce. He mapped routes through underground tomb complexes. He identified danger before it fully materialized, the specific weight distribution of a floor before it gave way, the atmospheric pressure change that preceded a sealed chamber's internal mechanisms activating, the Baccaral. Particular quality of silence that meant something was present and waiting, rather than simply falsi bos abahoe, absent. He survived things that should have killed him, not through luck but through the specific combination of extraordinary spatial awareness, reflexes sharpened by years of unauthorized infiltration, a relationship with risk that had been calibrated by growing up with parents who'd Bacchus Prenjing treated the most dangerous places in the world as the interesting ones. He was looking for his parents. He was also, unavoidably, falling in love with the work itself. In the underground burial chamber of an ancient emperor, he noticed something wrong with the off-ure. The mosaic tiles, centuries old, worn in the way that centuries of foot traffic produce, were, in one section, too smooth, too uneven, as if recently disturbed, or as if they had been Marco Weiss. Trees placed more recently than the ones around them. He pried up a corner. Beneath it, a fresco, enormous. The unmistakable image of Nizen, the distinctive curved horns, the specific posture of power that Shurimian artistic convention reserved for figures of genuine magical significance, and where the sorcerer's mouth should have been, a hole opening into darkness, the sound of sand shifting below. He tied a rope around his waist. He jumped. The darkness below was complete. He moved through it by touch and the internal compass that, Tampasaum, had never failed him, feeling along the surfaces of a space that no one had entered in an Afidja unknown number of centuries. When his hands found something solid and heavy, bronze by the weight and texture, shaped to fit a hand, with something at its center that pulsed faintly even. Through the metal, he understood what he had found before he could see it. He began climbing back up. The walls started moving before he reached the opening. The tomb's internal mechanisms, undisturbed for however long the tomb had been sealed, were responding to the removal of the artifact in exactly the way that ancient Shurimian engineering was designed to respond to unauthorized excavation, by collapsing inward, taking the unauthorized excavator with everything else. The opening above him was already narrowing. The rope was still attached to something that might not survive long enough to matter. He had not yet seen the gauntlet clearly. He pulled it onto his hand. The central stone, blue, bright, containing something that felt less like power and more like compressed possibility, activated at his touch in a way that suggested it recognized him, or recognized the category of person he was, or simply recognized the quality of need in the Fakab moment. He thought about the entrance, the exact location, the specific spatial coordinates his internal Chanpakas mind. Compass had been maintaining automatically since he descended. The world folded. He was there. Behind him, the chamber collapsed completely into the sand it had been waiting for centuries to beslow. Come the tamataman dax, tray to beslow, kamataman tamataman nax, tamatama nax. The gauntlet was everything, and not quite enough. It could translate intent into displacement. Think of a location you knew precisely, and you arrived there. The range was limited. The mechanism required time to reset between uses. These bots were constraints that mattered in the field, were the distance you needed to cover and the time. You had to cover it, rarely cooperated with what the artifact could provide. But it was real, it worked. And every time he used it, he thought, if my father had found this first, he could have traveled anywhere in the world and still made it home for dinner. He has continued searching. The ruins of Shurima have not finished giving up their contents. Hasbul made it home. Bishiakel, Ezreal has not finished asking them questions. He moves through places that no chartered explorer has mapped, finds things that academia has classified as lost, escapes situations that later accounts consistently understate the danger of, and sends reports back to Piltover that arrive intermittently and are received with a mixture of academic excitement and institutional anxiety. He has not found his parents, he has not stopped looking. The gauntlet on his hand was the pair to another gauntlet, removed from the same tomb years before he arrived, by someone whose identity and location he does not know. That thread is still Hake Shukorda, live. He is aware of it. It sits alongside the other threads he is following, in the part of his mind that has always been able to hold multiple routes to the same destination simultaneously. He keeps moving, he keeps mapping, he keeps the door open in the back of his mind in case someone steps through it. If this story reached you, subscribe. Every week, the full lore of a League of Legends champion, told the way it was meant to be heard.